Hey teens, thanks for joining us this week. We're going to talk about how we can be truly observant, listen to others, and feel what they're feeling as we talk about empathy. Jesus gives us a great example in John 11, one where we can follow in his footsteps so that we can really improve in this area. Are you ready? Let's get it then. Hey teens, my name is Chase. Thanks for tuning in this week. Last week, we had the privilege to hear from my great friend, Matthew Blair, who talked about love over everything and the call to love everyone, even our enemies. Matt focused on the actions behind loving others, and he walked through the story of Jesus washing his disciples' feet. Even Judas, who was about to turn him over to the authorities, and Peter, who was about to deny him 3 times. But obviously we know that Jesus paired loving actions with feeling deeply for people. Can you imagine if Jesus washed his disciples' feet, even the 2 that were about to betray him, but then went to his other disciples and was like, I hate those 2 guys. It would have totally negated the loving actions that he had right before that. We know that Jesus loved in every way possible, and along with his love, he excelled at something I think we have largely lost in our culture today. We are so self-centered by nature, but it has amplified in the times. We are told to look out for ourselves and no one else, that it's okay to be selfish. Sure, be nice when it's convenient, but you don't have to feel anything if it doesn't affect you personally. It's a characteristic that stands out, especially to those who are in need of it. Today, we're going to talk about empathy. Go ahead and grab your Bibles and turn to John 11. We'll get there in a moment, but I want to give us a definition for empathy. Empathy is the ability to understand and share the feeling of others. And a little bit deeper definition, empathy is the ability to sense other people's emotions, coupled with the ability to imagine what someone else might be thinking or feeling. We're going to be looking at a story today that I think gives us the best example of empathy that we will ever see. The story is a bit long, but we're going to read a large chunk and pull some points out that we can use for ourselves today. And we're going to start in verse 1 of John chapter 11. It says, "Now a man named Lazarus was sick. He was from Bethany, the village of Mary and her sister Martha. This Mary, whose brother Lazarus now lay sick, was the same one that poured perfume on the Lord and wiped his feet with her hair. So the sisters sent word to Jesus, 'Lord, the one you love is sick.' When he heard this, Jesus said, 'This sickness will not end in death. No, it is for God's glory, so that God's Son may be glorified through it.' Now Jesus loved Martha and her sister and Lazarus. So when he heard that Lazarus was sick, he stayed where he was for 2 more days, and then he said to his disciples, 'Let us go back to Judea.'" Let's skip down to verse 11. After he said this, he went on to tell them, "Our friend Lazarus has fallen asleep, but I am going there to wake him up." His disciples replied, "Lord, if he sleeps, he will get better." Jesus had been speaking of his death, but his disciples thought he meant natural sleep. So then he told them plainly, "Lazarus is dead. And for your sake, I'm glad I was not there, so you may believe. But let us go to him." So Jesus gets there and he learns that Lazarus has already been in the tomb for 4 days. And we're going to skip down to verse 21. "Lord," Martha said to Jesus, "if you had been here, my brother would not have died. But I know that even now, God will give you whatever you ask." Jesus said to her, "Your brother will rise again." Martha answered, "I know he will rise again in the resurrection at the last day." Jesus said to her, "I am the resurrection and the life. The one who believes in me will live even though they die. And whoever lives by believing in me will never die. Do you believe this?" "Yes, Lord," she replied. "I believe that you are the Messiah, the Son of God, who is to come into the world." After she had said this, she went back and called her sister Mary aside. "The teacher is here," she said, "and is asking for you." When Mary heard this, she got up quickly and went to him. Now Jesus had not yet entered the village, but was still at the place where Martha had met him. When the Jews who had been with Mary in the house, comforting her, noticed how quickly she got up and went out, they followed her, supposing she was going to the tomb to mourn there. When Mary reached the place where Jesus was and saw him, she fell at his feet and said, "Lord, if you had been here, my brother would not have died." When Jesus saw her weeping, and the Jews who had come along with her also weeping, he was deeply moved in spirit and troubled. "Where have you laid him?" he asked. "Come and see, Lord," they reply. Verse 35, Jesus wept. Then the Jews said, "See how he loved him." We're going to stop there. And obviously we know that Jesus went along to raise Lazarus from the dead. But I love this story because you see Jesus's love and empathy jump off the page. It's so obvious how much Jesus truly feels and experiences others' pain. I want to walk back through this story and pull 3 things out that Jesus does to show empathy and how we can learn and put them into practice in our own lives today in our own way. So number 1, Jesus was present. Jesus early in the story heard about Lazarus and the fact that he was sick, and he knew he was going to die, and he went to be with Lazarus's family. So what does that mean for us today? I think what it means is that we need to be observant of others. A few things have diminished empathy and caused us to distance ourselves from people instead of going to them like Jesus did here. First is our phones and technology in general. We constantly go through life with our head down, and we miss human interaction and cues given off by others of how they're feeling. We were made to be social and read these cues. Just like when you see someone get hurt and you can almost feel their pain. This happens to me all the time. I cannot watch leg injuries when I'm watching football or basketball and there's an ankle or a knee injury and they keep showing it over and over and over again. I just can't watch it because I feel like I can feel it in my own legs. And in the same way, we were meant to observe how someone's looking on their face or the cues they're giving off so that we can see that they're going through a hard time and do something about it, opposed to just walking by and not seeing because our heads are down all the time. And I have a story for that later on that I'll tell you to close out here in a bit. But that's the first thing, is to be present and to observe others for us. Number 2, Jesus listened. When Jesus got to Bethany and met up with Martha, Lazarus' sister, he allowed her to grieve, and he listened to her and truly listened. Jesus knew he was going to raise Lazarus from the dead and could have stopped her and been like, "Hey, chill. I'm about to raise him from the dead. There's no need to grieve. There's no need to be worried." But I think Jesus understood that regardless of what was about to happen, the raising of Lazarus, his family had still witnessed him die and had emotions that needed to be worked through. And so he listened and he comforted them. So for us today, once we are observant of others, as we talked about before, we need to truly listen and use active listening. So what that means is that when someone is expressing how they feel, don't think in your mind of what you're going to say next or a great point you're going to make or what you're going to have for dinner or where you're going to go next, but really listen so you can understand how they're feeling and get in their perspective and truly empathize. See how they view the world around them. It's not about who's right, if you're right, having a great answer. It's about getting to know them better and seeing things through their eyes and walking in their shoes. Which leads us to our third takeaway from Jesus' actions in this story. Jesus felt. Jesus wept is the shortest verse in the whole Bible, but it's one of the most powerful in understanding Jesus' character. I'm going to say it again. Jesus knew he was about to raise Lazarus from the dead, yet he was so moved by Mary's pain that he himself was pain and showed that pain by weeping in this moment. I chose this story because I love it, but we see Jesus' love and empathy for people all over the Bible. Jesus stopped or traveled long distances to heal the sick. He gave the blind sight. Think about the adulterous woman, right? This is crazy because he showed love, compassion, and empathy for this woman, but he also, whatever he wrote in the sand that day, caused for others to say, you know what? Maybe I'm in the same boat as this woman, and so I have no business stoning her. Whether it was fake empathy or they were just upset and they realized they were beaten, he was able to put empathy in other people's hearts by protecting this woman and stopping her from being stoned. It was nonstop for Jesus. He constantly loved. He constantly listened to people and observed them. He was there for them. He was present. And then he also felt. So for us today to feel, we need to open up. Now, I don't mean we all need to cry. I know some of us aren't criers. That doesn't mean you can't have empathy. There's actually 3 types of empathy, which I learned this week. There's cognitive empathy, where you can understand someone's perspectives and their feelings without actually feeling them yourself. Then there is emotional empathy, where, like Jesus, you do feel someone else's emotions and you're brought to emotion. And then there is compassionate empathy, which is a mix of both, which I think a lot of us can relate with. But similar to what we talked about earlier with our phones and getting in the way of human interaction, I believe that news and social media have affected our ability to feel as well. Everything in our world today moves so fast. Think about the news. You hear about tragedies, a break-in, murder of 2 people found dead, and then immediately here goes Bobo the otter pushing this ball around the pool and it's gone. It's in the ether, right? We don't have an opportunity to think, to feel, to have empathy for what just happened to these 2 people. And it's like that all the time. The horrific thing we just heard is gone and the next thing comes. Life moves on and we're not given the opportunity to stop, think, and understand what someone's going through and how they may be feeling. Open up and let yourself feel for other people, no matter what that means for you, whether it's feeling that emotion or at least understanding what people go through. I want to tell you 2 examples from my life that might help you think through this and might help you with your empathy. The first is when I was in college, it was my 2nd or 3rd year. I had just left a Bible talk on campus. And I was walking to the bus stop, and it was on UF campus, so there's a lot of people walking between classes. And it's not like it was in this remote area where no one was. I was walking and I just, like we said earlier, I wasn't looking at my phone. I had my head up and just kind of looking and catching people's eyes. And I noticed this girl sitting on a bench, and she was weeping. And people were just walking by, just kind of not noticing. And it wasn't like it was like she was quiet, like you could physically hear her crying, see her crying. And so I stopped. I asked if she was okay, if she was hurt or anything had happened to her. And she kind of didn't answer at first. And so I just sat down with her, and she kind of eventually told me that a friend of hers had passed away recently and she was just overcome with emotion. And so I asked if I could pray for her, and I prayed, and I just asked her, hey, do you want me to just sit here with you for a while? And I just sat with her. I didn't know this girl. I had never seen her before. I had never saw her again after that. And I don't know how much it really helped, but I think she just needed somebody to empathize with her, to sit with her, to listen to what had happened, and then just not say anything, to just be there and have some sort of human interaction. It didn't take much of my time, but it was awkward, like to sit there and just listen to someone cry that you don't know. It's awkward to hear someone cry that you do know and you don't really know what to do. But for someone that you don't know, it's not comfortable. And empathizing is not comfortable. You have to be comfortable with being uncomfortable for the sake of somebody else. So if you have the opportunity, take it and be empathetic to someone. The second one is just what's going on in our world today with COVID, with racial injustice. Without empathy, without seeing things from other people's point of view, especially during this time when you're not personally affected by COVID or someone in your family, if you're not personally affected by the racial injustices going on, it doesn't mean that you're not a part of it. You have to empathize with people, because if you don't, you build this wall around yourself. And what ends up happening is you look at the people around you and you think of them as the other or the enemy or the opposition. And it's not really that way. You just don't know their point of view. And so during this time is a perfect way to practice your empathy, is think about, even if COVID's not affecting you, even if the racial injustices aren't affecting you, talk to people, see what their experiences are. And that's what I've been doing. I've had a ton of conversations and listened to people. What has been your experience here in America or during COVID? Someone that maybe has a family member that has been affected. We can't be those people that think, you know what, it's not that big of a deal because I've never seen it, I'm not affected. But that doesn't mean that a ton of people around you and people you know and say that you love are being affected. So talk, have those conversations, be observant, see how they're hurting and ask them a lot of questions and be there for them. And here's the encouraging thing about this story with Jesus showing empathy. This isn't something that Jesus did, but he doesn't do now because he's not physically here on earth. Jesus has empathy for us, and here's how I know that he is capable of this. Jesus came to earth as a man. He came seeing things with men's eyes, men and women's eyes just like ours. He felt things. He felt with men's feelings, thinking things with men's mind. God knows what life is like because God, in the form of Jesus, came right inside of life. Jesus is not remote, detached, and disinterested, nor is he insulated or isolated from our lives. He knows our frame. He knows that we are but dust. He can see us in a reflection of what he experienced as a man himself. He can thus extend mercy to us, completely understanding what we're going through, and then intercede to God on our behalf, as it says in Romans 8. I really hope that this story of Jesus showing empathy and talking through how we can be observant of people, how we can be present, how we can listen and use active listening, and also feel, whether it's emotionally ourselves or understanding other people's emotions, and truly improve in our empathy. As we close here, I want to leave you guys a few discussion questions for you and your friends or your family or your teen ministry, anyone that's around you. Number one is, are you observant when it comes to other people, or are you distracted by other things around you? If you are a distracted person, how can you get yourself to be more observant? Number two, do you struggle with thinking ahead in conversation while the other person is speaking? And if so, why do you think that is? Number three, are you someone who naturally can feel someone else's emotions, or is that hard for you, and why? And the last one, number four, can you share an example of a time you were able to empathize with someone or a group of people? I really hope these questions help you to have really true, honest discussion, and it helps you with your empathy moving forward, especially during this time of COVID and racial injustice. And I know it can be difficult because we're away from each other, but it doesn't mean that we can't still empathize with people from afar and talk to people through social media, through phone call, through FaceTime. So I really hope that you can learn something and learn to feel other people's emotions and understand where they're coming from, so we can learn more about each other and the world around us. I love you guys, and we'll see you next week.
Yeah. Hey, thanks for watching our YouTube channel. Please like, comment, subscribe, and share. We are so excited about all that God is doing right here in Broward County, Florida.